The roll came fast and mean, a sideways tilt that tried to make decisions for ankles and wheels and men. Inigo dropped his weight low, one hand on the Black Dragon's trackpad, and let the world have him the way you let surf take you, loose, never limp. The S-60 skated, its spindly carriage legs screaming against glassed stone. The mortar baseplate hopped twice and dug in like a stubborn mule. The Mk-19 slewed, grinning, and waited to be asked again. Not a wave, Inigo said through gritted teeth as gravel tried to become ball bearings. A roll. Fine. The Lord used the roll like punctuation. Palms out, fingers slightly curved, the sigil ink along each phalanx brightening in sequence as he pushed. The ground obeyed because it remembered whose weight had been teaching it all day. Inigo rode the tilt 3 steps downhill, boot soles burning, and hip-checked the S-60's trail into a chewed slot between 2 fallen lintels. The gun bit. That was enough. He spun the handwheel, drove the muzzle across the Lord's midsection by feel and thermal, and palmed an HET from the tray. Different bite, he muttered, dragging a filthy thumb across the driving band. Bloom, an ugly old rune, half prayer and half fuse code. The 57mm barked. The shell climbed a hair, then did what he asked, bursting a meter off the chest. Fragments came down like a steel rain. The cloak skin flared hard, stuttering on the overload. Shards bit into plate bevels, skittered, lodged. The bright seam along the Lord's jaw flared and then guttered to hold heat where it belonged. Pleasure lived behind the visor. He leaned into it. Better, he said, sounding like a man at a tasting booth. Spice. Main course, Inigo said because sarcasm kept hands honest. He yanked the Mk-19 back to his hip and walked a short ladder along the giant's shins. Chidi thumped, then thumped again and again, 3 beats that made the ground decide to be vapor in circles the size of horse troughs. The palms drank pressure sideways. 2 blasts skittered off as if embarrassed. The third bit under the left foot on the heel and insulted balance all the same. The Lord shifted. Inigo fed the 57mm another bloom and saw fragments kiss the visor star, bright on thermal like summer hail. He didn't kid himself. The giant was adapting in real time. So was he. Shop, he breathed. Specialty rounds. Mortar 120mm. WP smoke screening. 8 RDS 3200 tokens by. Illumination. 6 RDS 900 tokens by. He dropped 2 WP down the tube fast, hissed a warning to air he hoped would listen, then added an illum behind to backlight the world into hard truth. White phosphorus rolled into thick, hungry curtains. The illum popped, hanging on a thin white string, painting the Lord's edges in clean contrast. The heat around him made halos in the smoke. The palm sigils pulsed like a second heart. Inigo slid, literal, back to the Black Dragon's breach. His hands were steadier when the big gun was close. He drew a kinetic dart, pressed spine and finish fast and clean and rammed it home. He didn't aim for chest or helm. He kept being mean to ankles. Down, he told inevitability and squeezed. The Black Dragon barked thunder again. The dart crossed smoke like a truth, punched plate at the ankle joint, and took a coin of armor with it as it bored through. The Lord dropped to one knee for one breath, head tilted, listening to pain with that same ardent curiosity. Yes, he breathed. Say it again. Inigo made a face. You're welcome. He shouldered the Carl G, slammed in HE this time, and sent it low at the planted knee while the giant's weight was still committing. The round hit, exploded into angry gravel and lodged fragments in every seam that had the bad luck to be near. The palm came down and shoved, but the shove found only smoke and grit and honest lack of leverage. Enough of your fun, Inigo said and made himself ugly. Missiles aim. Tow 2B arrow overflight top attack. 4 missiles 16,000 tokens by. The ITA screen flickered. The thermal overlay showed the Lord as a white anvil inside a furnace. Inigo lashed the tripod to the S-60's trail with a ratchet strap and leaned into the grip. Walk, he told the wire like an old dog and squeezed. The missile slid out slow and then remembered to be mean. It flew over the Lord, not into him, and 2 explosively formed penetrators snapped downward from the belly in a staggered punch. Pressure walls tried to cup them and failed. The warheads bit from above where the plate had to be thinner or not there. The first EFP punched the crown seam near the visor. The second kissed the top of the shoulder and spat copper into the armpit like a rude hand. The Lord laughed. It wasn't right. It tripped something in Inigo's chest that wanted to be a growl. The brute was, God's help them both, enjoying himself. Again, the helm invited. Fine, Inigo said, because refusing would taste like fear, and sent the second 2B to bracket the other shoulder. The twin penetrators bit. The Lord staggered a fraction and stepped into it as if waltzing into pain's lead. Next, the Lord asked, greedy as a boy in a candy house. Next you get dessert, Inigo said. Direct fire field guns. M119 105mm howitzer. 12 He 6 VT 4 smoke 55,000 tokens by. The 105 slammed onto its trails as if it had always been there. He cranked traverse by feel, kicked the spade with a heel, rammed a VT fuse he into the breech and scrawled bloom and cone along the side because sometimes you bully a blast into the shape you need. He set the fuse tall and mean and fired. The VT did its job, bursting 10 meters above the Lord's head. Cone obeyed and drove fragments inward instead of down. It was mean geometry. The cloak skin dimmed and bowed. The visor's star flashed as something metal inside met something sharper than pride. The palm pressed and bled the cone sideways, but not before it spoke in the Lord's ear with a handful of whispers named Shard. Clever, the brute murmured, almost tender. I like you angry. Inigo ignored the compliment, because survival is learning which words you can't afford. He loaded another VT and another and walked them around the giant like a ring of bells a choir would envy. Each burst shaved edges, forced adjustments, stole the kind of lazy step that makes big men feel immortal. The Lord's palm cut the next 105 shell's path with a small, dismissive gesture. The round bent into a building carcass and burst apologetically. Fine. Inigo had other ways. Shop, he hissed. Small arms machine guns. M2 HB.50 on low tripod. 2 sets plus 800 RDS 16,000 tokens by. He slammed one low behind an overturned cart, threw the lid off an ammo can, ran the belt through with a fingernail's 2-word benediction, line bite, and slapped the cover closed. He dragged the second to the other side of the lane and did the same, creating a V of cranky arguments at ankle height. Talk to him, he told the Brownings, and worked both butterflies like a man playing unpopular organ hymns. .50 slugs stitched the Lord's shins and knees. Most sparked on bevels. Enough found the groove's fragment had started their own. The giant didn't hurry, a kind of compliment. He stepped into the V, lifted a palm to each stream, and smoothed both lines of .50 down into hiss and light. He was busy for a half-breath. Inigo spent it without thinking. He snatched an M18 smoke, yanked the spoon and lobbed it low past the Lord, not at him. The can hissed white against black stone. Inigo wasn't hiding, he was backlighting. The thermal against the new cold wall told truths the bright world fudged. The palm sigil's cadence sped. The helm leaned as if curious. Inigo shot the visor star with the M4 again because stubbornness makes small storms matter. 2 rounds skated. One found that impolite candle hole and went inside. The helm jerked. A sound like a swallowed curse, low and honest. Human iron, the Lord said, delight ragged now, reverent as a penitent, is so good. Stay for the tasting menu, Inigo said. He grabbed a 2B2A for old time's sake and sent it not to the chest, not to the helm but to the bright palm itself. The Lord tried to cup it. The shape charge folded his geometry into a longer, uglier line. Copper bit rune. The light along one finger guttered, then steadied. The next shove cost him. The ground still rolled, less from power now than from habit. The Lord walked inside it the way a man who has lived near waves learns to walk on wet sand. He pivoted toward the black dragon and Lyra and took a long, deliberate step. Don't, Inigo said not loud. He laid a hand on the black dragon's flank like he would on a pan he trusted, breathed once to remind his hands of their job, and pulled a fresh kinetic dart from the rack. Fracture. Ugly, jagged, disobedient. He pressed it into the dart's spine and felt the metal accept the idea with a shudder that traveled into his bones. He rammed it home and drove the elevation down a hair. The Lord lifted his palm for that neat wall he liked. The black dragon fired. The dart hit the pressure shape and cracked it like spring ice over a culvert. It hit the chest and shattered into 6 flat razors that chose malice over efficiency. The Lord stopped laughing. The seams along his torso fountained light, then tightened down like a man gritting his teeth. He didn't fall. He didn't speak for a breath. When he did, the joy had focused into something serious. Yes, he said softly as if to himself. That was new. He took another step. The cobbles powdered under his boot. His visor star leaked a steady white now. The palms came up slower. He was spending. Inigo found that he was smiling. It wasn't sane. It wasn't polite. It was tired satisfaction for a man who cooks and finally sees the crust set just so. Shop, he said, because madness and logistics are cousins. Rocket saturation. BM-21 grad 122mm 40 tube. 40 He rockets 210,000 tokens by. The truck appeared wrong in the square, Soviet shoulders broad and proud, rails tilted like an organ that had an opinion. Inigo didn't have time to counsel it on aim. He traced fall along the front rank and finish along the back. Only that because too much talk makes some instruments sulk. Then slammed the safeties off and hammered the salvo key. 40 trails of smoke rose and then descended in a sheet that made a new sky. The first dozen arrived ragged and rude, pocking the world with potholes friendly to no cart. The next dozen learned to group as the smoke sucked heat, and the grad remembered it had been built to make men put their heads down on 3 continents. The last 2 volleys hammered a ragged rectangle around the Lord. He stood in the middle of it and took the lesson like a man in a cold shower after a long run. Hurt that reads as relief. He pressed, smoothed, drank, let the blasts rip cloak skin away in sheets, and then sloughed new flame up from seams that were learning to be veins. More, he whispered, horse drunk on it. More. Not today, Inigo said, throat raw, vision tunneling at the edges with the kind of fatigue that turns stares into suggestions. Bill me later. The Lord looked at Lyra again, one glance almost curious, and back to Inigo. He lifted his palm, and this time the light along his fingers didn't flare clean. It stuttered. The push he sent at the BM-21's rails bent 3 tubes and left the rest to sulk intact. Unbound soul, he said, the title tender in that furnace of a voice. You made the day remember its edges. I have been starving a long time. I noticed, Inigo said. The helm dipped a fraction. Respect chosen again. Keep your iron singing. Gather your 7. Teach the city to bite. I will come back hungry. He tapped 2 fingers against the torn star at his visor as if marking the place where the world had finally kissed him, and stepped backward into the seam he'd left in the air. It closed over him like polite cloth. Silence tried to stand. It wobbled. Inigo stood with the grad's control box dead in his fist and remembered to let go. He put it down on the truck step like you put hot cookware on a trivet. Then he stumbled, honestly now because there was no one here to impress, and made it to Lyra on sheer habit and taxes owed. Pulse there. Stronger than a few minutes ago. Her mouth had more color. Her eyelids fluttered once and didn't open. He adjusted the sling again because doing something small on purpose keeps you from doing something big and stupid out of fear. You missed the part where I invented a salad of steel, he told her. It was crunchy. He sat with his back against the black dragon and let the shakes have him for the span of 2 breaths, then 3. He shoved a canteen at his face and managed to drink water without apologizing to anyone for how much it burned his split lip. He tore a strip off something clean and wiped carbon and grit from the M4's ejection port because the rifle had earned that much tenderness. The square looked like a diagram of bad decisions. The Avenger canted on a tired stand, the Pion sulking with a crumpled mouth, the 105 with its breech still warm and its carriage proud, the S-60 posing like Soviet steel does, the BM-21's rails smoking like cheap incense, the Mk-19 grinning down an alley of ankle-eating potholes, the mortar tube bent into a regretful cane. The black dragon, murder sleek, hummed steady against his spine. Beyond, the river spoke to new stone in sibilance. Ash fell like slow black snow. The bells in Elandra had found a single note that meant hold and held it, stubborn as a farmer. Inigo tipped his head back until it clunked against the dragon's plate and closed his eyes for exactly 1 count of 10 because any more would turn into sleep. He opened them to the same ruin and somehow, a world that felt heavier and easier both. Human weapons are so good, he echoed under his breath, tasting the Lord's delighted blasphemy and making it theirs. Good enough. He looked west where the mountain wore its new teeth and addressed the unseen in air that might be hearing him. Next time you come hungry, he said, soft and unkind, I'll have more courses. He set the M4 across his knees, checked Lyra's breathing one more time, and started counting what he still had that could be made to bite. Hours to buy. Receipts to keep. A door to hold until the rest of the city learned to love the taste of iron. Unbound soul, he said, the title tender in that furnace of a voice. You made the day remember its edges. I have been starving a long time. I noticed, Inigo said. The helm dipped a fraction. Respect chosen again. Keep your iron singing. Gather your 7. Teach the city to bite. I will come back hungry. He tapped 2 fingers against the torn star at his visor as if marking the place where the world had finally kissed him, and stepped backward into the seam he'd left in the air. It closed over him like polite cloth. Silence tried to stand. It wobbled. Inigo stood with the Grad's control box dead in his fist and remembered to let go. He put it down on the truck step like you put hot cookware on a trivet. Then he stumbled, honestly now because there was no one here to impress, and made it to Lyra on sheer habit and taxes owed. Pulse there. Stronger than a few minutes ago. Her mouth had more color. Her eyelids fluttered once and didn't open. He adjusted the sling again because doing something small on purpose keeps you from doing something big and stupid out of fear. You missed the part where I invented a salad of steel, he told her. It was crunchy. He sat with his back against the black dragon and let the shakes have him for the span of 2 breaths, then 3. He shoved a canteen at his face and managed to drink water without apologizing to anyone for how much it burned his split lip. He tore a strip off something clean and wiped carbon and grit from the M4's ejection port because the rifle had earned that much tenderness. The square looked like a diagram of bad decisions. The Avenger canted on a tired stand, the Pion sulking with a crumpled mouth, the 105 with its breech still warm and its carriage proud, the S-60 posing like Soviet steel does, the BM-21's rails smoking like cheap incense, the Mk-19 grinning down an alley of ankle-eating potholes, the mortar tube bent into a regretful cane. The black dragon, murder-sleek, hummed steady against his spine. Beyond, the river spoke to new stone in sibilance. Ash fell like slow black snow. The bells in Elandra had found a single note that meant hold and held it, stubborn as a farmer. Inigo tipped his head back until it clunked against the dragon's plate and closed his eyes for exactly 1 count of 10 because any more would turn into sleep. He opened them to the same ruin and somehow, a world that felt heavier and easier both. Human weapons are so good, he echoed under his breath, tasting the Lord's delighted blasphemy and making it theirs. Good enough. He looked west where the mountain wore its new teeth and addressed the unseaman air that might be hearing him. Next time you come hungry, he said, soft and unkind, I'll have more courses. He set the M4 across his knees, checked Lyra's breathing one more time, and started counting what he still had that could be made to bite. Hours to buy. Receipts to keep. A door to hold until the rest of the city learned to love the taste of iron. The smoke had thinned to a tired veil when the heat came back. Not with a hammer, not with a crack in the world, just a warmth at the edge of sight, like a forge door opened 1 notch. Unbound soul. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a sermon. Just a voice leaning on its elbows. Inigo didn't stand all the way. He let the M4 rest across his thighs, 1 palm on Lyra's wrist, the other on the rifle's receiver. You back for seconds, he said, or to complain about the service? A ripple, maybe laughter if lava had a sense of humor. The Lord of Destruction stepped out of the ripple without the pageantry. Cloak of fire pulled close. Armor scorched and cracked, the bright seams breathing slower. He didn't come closer than shouting distance. He didn't need to. Your cannon, the Lord said, chin tilting toward the black dragon, is rude. Thank you, Inigo said. The small storms, the Lord added, visor turning to the scarred star where a handful of 5.56 had bullied its way inside, were ruder. Those were personal. A pause, the kind conversations make when both people agree not to lie. You bested me today, the Lord said, like he'd decided it was a word he could pick up without it burning his hand. Not in the old way where one falls and the other plants a flag, but in the way that matters. You made me change first. Inigo swallowed, throat raw from dust and yelling and the weirdness of being congratulated by a furnace. Yeah, he allowed. I noticed. You have very many answers, the Lord went on, almost conversational. Every time I pressed, you reached into the air and came out with a new tooth. I do not know how many teeth you have. Inigo didn't touch the shop pane hovering polite in his peripheral vision. He kept his voice light. Infinite devolves to enough, most days. Enough to make me guess, the Lord said. Enough to make guessing expensive. They looked at each other through heat that had decided not to lie anymore. So, Inigo said, because someone had to break the glass. You leaving? I am, the Lord said. He tilted his head toward Lyra. And you will let me? Inigo's jaw worked. I don't know what else you can do, he said honestly. I've seen the hammer tricks. The pressure walls. The seams. But after that. He shook his head. You've got a look that says, surprises. I've had enough surprises for one noon. Surprises, the Lord echoed, amused. That's a kind word. I have things that would teach us both lessons we do not want to learn today. He spread an empty hand and watched the runes along his palm flicker. And I will not, now that I am finally entertained, risk ending my day on your menu. Inigo snorted. That's not the worst review I've ever gotten. A silence, almost companionable, drifted through the square like cooler air. You cook loud, the Lord said. You make iron sing in keys I have not heard since the world remembered it could change. I cheat, Inigo said. Catalog on demand. Cheating is a word losers use for problems they did not solve before the bell, the Lord said, casual. I don't mind your shop. I mind your questions. You aim where it matters. Knees, wrists, the small hinges. You backlight me to show my lies. You throw storms to get me to show my hand, then put a knife through the glove. There is a lot about you I do not know. Same, Inigo said. He kept his voice even. You don't swing for show. You don't miss. You learned mid-stride. Liked getting hurt. Ads by Pub Future. Pain speaks plainly, the Lord said. I have not heard plain speech in a long time. He looked, if you could call it looking, toward the mountain where half a face was missing. I could keep pressing, he said like a man thinking out loud. But then I would spend. And I do not spend when I have found a thing worth saving for. Saving for what? For next, the Lord said simply. When your seven stand with you. When your city puts on teeth and thinks that makes it safe. You keep saying seven, Inigo said. You counting. A continent counted for me once, the Lord said, a flicker of old arrogance peeking through. 7 platinums. 7 people with the prerogative to be inconvenient. You're 1.5 today. Inigo glanced down at Lyra. She's the half. She is the half that makes you sharp, the Lord said, and there was no mockery in it. Do not mistake insult for accuracy. A leaf that stings is still a leaf. But she taught my need to remember what it's for. I like her. Get in line, Inigo said automatically. This time the ripple of amusement was obvious. You will not chase, the Lord said. You are not stupid. Opinion varies, Inigo said. He let the M4 tilt towards safe without looking away. Truth is, I can't guarantee I win a second round. Not with her down. Not with the big guns crooked. Not without rolling the dice on something I can't put back in the box after. So, no. I won't chase. Good, the Lord said, and there was that odd, almost polite respect again. I am not running. I am declining a fight I cannot be sure is mine. A first in centuries. Glad to make history. You make messes, the Lord corrected dry. History is just a clerk's word for a big mess the next day lacks the will to clean. Inigo found himself, ridiculously, liking the bastard's cadence, the way he swung between threat and kitchen talk, between awe and arithmetic. The feeling was disgusting and honest. You keep talking about my iron like it's more than metal, he said. What's your deal with it? It tells the truth when a hand insists, the Lord said easy. Priests lie and call it comfort. Nobles lie and call it order. Your iron lies less. You make it say no in voices stones remember. I approve. Inigo squinted. You break cities for fun or for philosophy? For purpose, the Lord said, and closed that door with a tone that said questions beyond it would be unwise. Yeah, Inigo said. Figured. The Lord shifted his weight. The seams along his chest flared and then dimmed, like a man testing a bruise and deciding to leave it alone. I will go, he said. I will return soon. Not out of fury. Out of gratitude. You gave me back a thing I'd lost. A day that fought back. You're welcome. Inigo tried. Stop being polite, the Lord advised, casual again. It makes me want to be gentle. I hate gentle. Duly noted. One lesson, the Lord added like a man tossing a coin on the bar on his way out. The stones under your city remember patterns older than guild ledgers. Your scryers chase smoke and names. Tell them to mark sound. The old wards hum when I walk near. They do not sing for them yet. Make someone teach them. I'll pass it along, Inigo said and meant it. The Lord inclined his helm toward Lyra, then toward the black dragon, then toward Inigo's hands. Keep her breathing. Keep that barrel honest. Keep your thumbnails sharp. He stepped backward. No flourish. No ring. Just a seam that remembered how to be kind to him. Before it closed, the voice came one last time, lighter than it had any right to be. Unbound soul, he said. Thank you for today. Don't make me regret it, Inigo said. I will try, the Lord said, and the seam stitched itself shut like a wound, deciding to scar instead of bleed. Silence arrived, clumsy, and then sat down properly. The river hissed where it licked hot rock. A piece of somewhere collapsed itself into dust a few blocks over and then was done. Far away, Alandra's bells trailed toward something like agreement. Here it was just Inigo, Lyra, and a square full of unwise metal. He let a breath go that he didn't know he'd been holding, then another, then checked Lyra again because that was the only ritual that mattered. Pulse. They're warm and quicker than before. Skin. Cooling now that the worst of the day's fury had walked off. A small line between her eyebrows made it look like she was scowling in her sleep, which was entirely on brand. Okay, he told her. He's gone. It's just us. He blinked the shop pane up and pushed past weapons on habit. He went where he always left for last. Freedom Shop. Medical and field care. A list rolled by that smelled like bleach and bad coffee. IFAKs, trauma kits, airway packs, splints for setups, analgesics. He could feel the sting of emergency room lights just reading the options. IV Pro bleed/respiratory. Tourniquet, hemostatic gauze, pressure bandage, chest seals, NPA airway shears, nitrile gloves, 3,200 tokens by. Trauma medic pack, advanced. 2 times pressure dressings, 2 times hemostatic rolls, 2 times occlusive chest seals, SAM splint, triangular bandages, elastic wraps, irrigation syringes, 2L sterile saline, burn dressings, thermal blanket, vitals monitor, basic, penlight, 9,800 tokens by. Analgesic module, non-narcotic. Acetaminophen, ibuprofen, oral rehydration salts, instant cold packs, 800 tokens by. Cervical collar, adjustable, 600 tokens by. Pelvic binder, 1,200 tokens by. Stretcher folding with poles, 1,400 tokens by. Tokens ticked down without drama. Crates and pouches thunked into the world with the satisfaction of good zippers. Inigo snapped on gloves because that kind of ritual makes hands gentle, cracked a saline bottle and set about work he trusted. Airway, breathing, circulation, he told the air because saying it out loud steadied the part of him that wanted to sprint in circles. He pinched Lyra's jaw, lifted gently. Air in, air out, ragged yes but regular. No gurgle, no snore that said tongue. He left the NPA alone for now. Head injuries and guesswork were a bad mix. He peeled her helm back with care, penlight quick across pupils. Unequal earlier, reactive now, both narrowing under the lights nagging. Good. Not perfect. Enough. He irrigated the scalp cut with saline, Lyra's hair sticky and stubborn beneath the blood. She flinched once and he paused and let a breath go through his teeth. Sorry, he said and meant it. He wicked the blood aside, laid butterfly strips loose to keep edges honest, then a clean pad and a wrap, not too tight, not too proud. Her shoulder worried him most. Lamellar caved in, clavicle likely yelling, swelling coming in like late company. He slit the armor away in sections, whispered apologies to leather as if it were a living thing, and breathed only when the last buckle gave without cutting her more. The shoulder had that awful roundness it shouldn't. He palpated gently along the clavicle and felt that gritty give that means later will be unkind. All right, he said, making the world small enough to manage. We're parking that. He shaped the SAM splint into a broad U, patted the edges and tucked it under her arm, forearm against belly, wrist supported. He built a sling from a triangular bandage, then a swathe to pin upper arm to chest and make the whole broken mechanism someone else's problem. He slid the adjustable C-collar on not because he was sure but because just in case is a faithful church. Ribs. He tested lightly and found 2 spots that hissed opinion under his fingers. Not flail, thank gods. Elastic wrap across the lower chest to discourage heroics. loose enough to allow breathing to do its job. He peeled back lamellar along her flank and checked for the angry hiss of a sucking wound. None. He laid a chest seal close anyway. Insurance is cheaper than regret, and taped corners with hands that finally felt clever again. He tucked the thermal blanket over her like a promise, slipped a cold pack under the swelling at the shoulder, another at the temple, and tucked a third under the back of her neck when the collar allowed it. He hooked the basic vitals monitor cuff to her forearm and let it tell him what he already knew. Pulse high, pressure lowish, oxygen acceptable, all of it trending in the right direction now that the day had stopped trying to be clever. He didn't touch the analgesics. Head injury plus pills was a dance for later. He dribbled a wet cloth across her lips. You don't get the good drugs, he told her softly, because your brain took a hammer's opinion. You get my charming bedside manner instead. He slid the stretcher open in the lee of the Black Dragon's stabilizer, then decided he wasn't moving her yet. The ground under the pad was the most honest surface in the square, and he liked honest today. He tucked pads under pressure points, checked the sling again, checked the scalp again, checked the breathing again, then sat back on his heels and let the quiet tell him he'd done enough for the next 5 minutes. He took the collar off his own neck, figurative, and reached for water. 2 swallows. He let the canteen rest on his knee and stared at nothing until nothing blinked first. He set up the vitals monitor to chirp at him if numbers misbehaved. He strung a trip line across the narrow approach, not a weapon, just a bell he'd found in the field odds and ends box months ago and bought because it had a nice ring. He nudged the 105's trail a degree because fussing is how you stay standing. He slotted one last VT fuse, chalked 9M cone on the shell with a charcoal nub, and felt better for having written a plan on metal. Then he sat back down in the place his body had already warmed and rested his forearm across Lyra's good one. Casual chat with a walking furnace, he said, mostly to convince himself it had happened. He says I bested him. Says he's leaving. Says he'll be back hungry. The bells in Elandra settled into a long, stubborn note that said hold. The river agreed with a hiss. The Black Dragon hummed because it never stopped humming, not really. Somewhere beyond the ruined granary, a pigeon decided life might be worth risking again, landed and looked very disappointed at the aisle selection. Yeah, Inigo said to the bird, to the river, to the armor at his back, to the sleeping woman with the scowl that dared the world to try again. Me too. He blinked the shop pane open one more time, thumb hovering over comms out of reflex. He could buy a sat rig, key the guild, put words in the air that would become orders in men's mouths. He could also wait exactly 5 more minutes and make sure Lyra's numbers didn't decide to be dramatic. He waited. The monitor held its peace. Lyra's chest lifted, fell, lifted again. A puff of breath moved a strand of hair across her cheek like a hand. He exhaled. Okay, he said, and this time it wasn't to fill the air. It was a decision. You nap. I'll make the world less stupid. He stood, knees arguing, and set himself to neat, ordinary things. Policing brass because that's how you keep track of what you spent. Propping the MK-19 on a chunk of wall at just the right pettiness. Rolling bandage wrappers and stuffing them into an empty smoke can because litter is a sin. Tucking the empty javelin tube under the Black Dragon's deck where he wouldn't trip on it in the dark. Counting the Carl G rounds one more time. Wiping the M4's ejection port again because love looks like maintenance. When the chores ran out, he came back to the only job that hadn't. Watching. He sat where steel made his spine honest, kept Lyra's hand in his, and let the valley try on quiet again. Not safe. Not finished. Just quiet enough for a casual talk to echo in his head. You bested me. I'll be back. Keep your iron singing. Deal. Inigo said to the smoke, to the seam that wasn't there anymore, to the next hour he intended to buy. But dinner's on you. The valley didn't look like victory when they left. It looked like a crime scene that hadn't decided whether to report itself. The Black Dragon's stabilizers still steamed. The grad truck smoldered like incense for the dead. Craters pocked the cobbles where Himars had written its gospel. Inigo gave the wreckage one last look before turning the key in the JLTV. The engine caught with that familiar, reassuring diesel growl. Honest. Loud enough to argue with silence. He shifted into gear, nudged the wheel, and the armored rig crawled forward over stone that was still half glass from the artillery heat. Lyra lay strapped to the stretcher across the rear bench, thermal blanket tucked to her chin, vitals monitor chirping soft like a lullaby. Inigo checked the numbers again before moving because ritual steadies hands. Pulse, still high, still regular. Pressure, low but trending. Breathing, shallow but honest. He cinched the straps a little tighter so she wouldn't roll with the ride. Field trip, he muttered. Back to town. Don't worry, I'll do all the sightseeing commentary. He eased the JLTV out of the square and onto the road west. The tires thumped over broken stone, suspension groaning. The landscape on either side wore fresh wounds. Trees stripped bare by shockwaves leaned like drunks. Roofs of nearby farmsteads sagged, some burning, some collapsed entirely. The air still smelled of burned limestone and propellant, sharp enough to sting his nose. Inigo kept one hand on the wheel, the other brushing the buttstock of the M4 across his thigh. Miles passed. No patrols. No carts. No refugees trickling toward safety. Nothing. That was the first wrong note. The second came when they rolled past a mile marker carved in old guild script. Usually a checkpoint sat there. Half a dozen guards, a wagon for inspections, a kettle of soup to warm the long night. Now the post was deserted. The soup kettle lay on its side in the weeds, blackened from a fire weeks old. The air smelled of rust and silence. Inigo gripped the wheel tighter. Where the hell is everyone? Lyra didn't answer. Her breath rasped under the blanket. He glanced at her once, then forced his eyes back on the road. He couldn't afford to split his anger. Not yet. Another mile. Another marker. Another empty outpost. The JLTV's headlights carved a lonely tunnel through dusk. The dash clock ticked toward evening, and the bells of Elandra were faint in the distance. A stubborn note of hold stretched thin across miles of quiet. By the time the city walls rose on the horizon, Inigo's jaw ached from clenching. He muttered to himself low and raw, they knew. They had to know. And still nobody. Elandra's western gate usually buzzed like a hive. Caravans lined up, merchants shouting, guards barking, wheels clattering over timber. Today the approach road was barren. The towers loomed overhead, lanterns flickering, banners limp in the still air. Only 2 guards leaned at the gate itself, spears propped against the stone. They looked up as the JLTV rolled close, confusion flashing across faces. One raised a hand. Identify. Inigo leaned out the window, voice like gravel. It's me. Open your damn gate. Recognition dawned, quickly replaced by unease. Sir Inigo. We weren't told you were. Open, Inigo snapped, sharper than he meant. The engine idled loud behind his words. She needs a bed, not questions. The guards scrambled. Chains clattered. The gate shuddered upward, timbers groaning like they resented the work. Inigo eased the JLTV through, tires crunching on the cobbles of Elandra's outer ring. The familiar smell of the city, coal smoke, horse sweat, river damp, hit him like a slap. Normally it meant home. Tonight it felt like neglect. He parked hard against the guild's motor yard, yanked the brake and climbed out. The night air was cooler here, lanterns painting long shadows across stone. He went around back, lowered the stretcher carefully, and slid Lyra onto a waiting gurney one of the med clerks had finally noticed to fetch. Infirmary now, Inigo said. Head trauma, fractured clavicle, rib bruising. Vitals on monitor. No narcotics yet. The clerks blinked at him, then hustled her inside. Inigo watched until the door shut behind them, then turned on his heel. Now he had room for his anger. He parked hard against the guild's motor yard, yanked the brake and climbed out. The night air was cooler here, lanterns painting long shadows across stone. He went around back, lowered the stretcher carefully, and slid Lyra onto a waiting gurney one of the med clerks had finally noticed to fetch. Infirmary now, Inigo said. Head trauma, fractured clavicle, rib bruising. Vitals on monitor. No narcotics yet. The clerks blinked at him, then hustled her inside. Inigo watched until the door shut behind them, then turned on his heel. Now he had room for his anger. The guild hall glowed with lamplight, stone arches ringing with late-night voices. Clerks with ink-stained fingers shuffled ledgers. Messengers darted in and out. The smell of wax, parchment and roasted beans sat heavy in the air. Inigo didn't slow. Boots slammed across the marble floor, echoing off high ceilings. Apprentices flattened themselves against pillars as he passed. Someone called his name, he didn't answer. He shoved the council chamber doors open hard enough to make the hinges cry. Thorn sat at the long table, maps spread before him, quills scratching notes. He looked up, eyes tired but alert, and froze when he saw Inigo's face. "Inigo," he began. Don't you start," Inigo cut in. His voice was sharp steel. "Where the hell were you?" The room went still. Clerks at side tables stared. One dropped a pen. Thorn straightened in his chair. "Explain yourself." "You know damn well what I mean." Inigo slammed both palms on the table. The maps jumped. "Lyra and I went toe-to-toe with the Lord of Destruction in the valley. Alone. No reinforcements. No scouts. Not even a runner on the road. Nothing. We bled for hours out there, and the only reason we're back is because he decided to walk away." Murmurs fluttered around the chamber. Thorn's jaw tightened. "We couldn't reach you." "Bullshit," Inigo spat. "You couldn't even try? No riders? No signal flares? Nothing but bells ringing in the distance? We were hung out to dry." Thorn's voice hardened. The scry lines collapsed. Every relay went dark. "We sent patrols. None returned. The valley was unreachable." "Unreachable," Inigo repeated flat. "Then how the hell did he find us?" "The Lord walked right up and laughed in our faces. You expect me to believe an army of clerks couldn't even manage a single line through while a flaming titan was taking strolls?" Thorn's gaze flickered, guilt and fatigue battling for ground. "We didn't expect him to move so soon." Inigo's laugh was bitter, humorless. "You didn't expect him to move? That's his entire hobby. And because of that oversight, Lyra's half broken. I'm running on spite and diesel, and the city has no idea how close it came to being a crater." Thorn exhaled, shoulders sinking. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't put her shoulder back together," Inigo snapped. "Sorry doesn't fix the fact that the road back was empty. Not light patrols, not refugees, not even scavengers. That's worse than silence. It means people already decided this city can't protect them." The chamber's murmur grew louder. Clerks whispered, glancing at each other with pale faces. Thorn tapped the table with one finger, a nervous habit, then stopped himself. "We will investigate." "You'll do more than that," Inigo said, leaning forward. His eyes burned. "You'll start thinking like the bastard we fought. He adapts. He learns. He's not going to stop because we're tired or sorry or writing reports. He wants a fight. And right now, the only two idiots willing to give him one are bleeding in your yard." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crack stone. Thorn met his gaze, jaw set. "You've made your point." "No," Inigo said. "Not yet. You want my point? It's this. Next time, don't let the bells do the talking. Don't hide behind excuses. Because if Lyra dies, if he comes back tomorrow and the streets are still empty, I swear to every god that's listening, I'll stop fighting for this city and start fighting it." The threat hung in the air, ugly and real. Thorn didn't answer. He just nodded once, curt like a man acknowledging a blow he couldn't parry. Inigo turned on his heel and left before his hands decided to make the point louder. The walk back to the infirmary burned the last of his adrenaline. By the time he pushed through the door, the shakes had returned. The room smelled of alcohol and boiled linen. Lanterns painted long shadows across rows of cots. Clerks moved between patients, murmuring, adjusting bandages. Lyra lay near the center, swaddled in blankets, color returning to her cheeks. The vitals monitor chirped steady. Inigo's chest unclenched a fraction. He dropped into the chair at her bedside, elbows on knees, face in his hands. He stayed like that for a long minute until the shakes eased. Finally, he looked up at her. "We're back," he said softly. "Not safe, not done. But back." He reached for her hand and held it because that was a ritual too. "Thorn says they couldn't reach us," he muttered. "Maybe he's right. Maybe he's lying. Doesn't matter. We made it back. That's on us. And next time, because there will be a next time, I'm not trusting bells or excuses. Just us, the shop, and whatever else we can drag screaming into the fight." Her fingers twitched faintly under his, almost enough to make him believe she'd heard. He leaned back in the chair, let his head rest against the wall, and let exhaustion settle like a heavy coat. For now that was enough. They let him take her home at dawn, after the night had worn the warded lamps thin and the med clerks had run out of ways to keep him in a chair. "Observations good," the elder one said, voice smoked with fatigue. Her number's like you again. Keep her quiet. No stairs if you can avoid them. Cold to the shoulder. Wake her every couple of hours and make sure her words know how to stand up. Copy, Inigo said, because agreeing gets doors opened. He wheeled her on the gurney as far as the infirmary threshold, then swapped to the stretcher he trusted. The jail TV idled in the yard, a steady diesel heart against a city that still didn't know whether to wake or keep pretending to sleep. He eased Lyra into the back, tucked the thermal up to her jaw, checked the monitor, checked the sling, checked the wrap, checked himself. Home, he told her. Our kind. No clerks. No bells. Alandra was a different city at first light. The plaza had not yet rolled its voices out proper, and the river lay quiet under a low veil. Somewhere bakers shouted to ovens. Someone swept a stoop with broomstrokes that meant habit, not courage. The bells held their long note of hold, less a shout now, more a background hum, like the city humming to itself so it wouldn't forget the tune. He took the long way around the square because the short way had cobbles warped by history and physics. His hands, finally not shaking, found the turns without asking. The JV grumbled up the lane behind the market, past the spice warehouse with its painted shutters, past the cooper's yard stacked with hoops and staves like ribs waiting for a barrel's skin, to the narrow mews where their door lived. Rico was already on the step when he parked, chalk on his cheek, hair a mess. He must have slept at the stall on a sack of potatoes again. Maddie stood behind him, ladle tucked into her belt like a short, practical sword. Both of them straightened when they saw Lyra's shape under canvas. She? Rico started. She breathes, Inigo said softly. That's what we own today. Together they did what small crews do well. Rico took the rear poles, Maddie cleared the way, doors opened before he asked. Their rooms were up one long flight. He'd argued with the med clerk on that, lost, then bought a folding ramp from the shop because he didn't like losing. The ramp took the angle with a groan that matched his. The stretcher slid, and the three of them made a slow climb into the place that smelled like pepper, oil, leather, and the burnt sugar edge of yesterday's caramelized onions. It was 2 rooms and a corridor. The front room with a table and a battered couch, the back with a bed and a window that watched the alley like a bored cat. Hooks by the door held cloaks and a trailing tangle of bowstrings. The corner rack held pans polished by use. The shelf above the table kept a row of spice jars neat, their labels a mix of Lyra's neat hand and Inigo's scrawl. It was small, honest, and theirs. They got Lyra into the bed without waking her fully. She frowned once when the sling snagged. Inigo moved his hand before the wince finished forming. He tucked the thermal blanket over her like a contract, slid the vitals cuff onto her forearm again, found a spot for the monitor where he could see numbers without having to stand and make his ribs protest. He wedged a folded towel under the broken shoulder to keep gravity polite. Maddie stood with her hands clenched around that ladle, jaw tight. Do we open today? She asked, because work is the question people ask when they don't know what else to do. Not the stall, Inigo said without checking his own face in his answer. We feed us first. He caught her look, softened, rephrased. Late. Maybe. If the city remembers how to stand. Rico hovered in the doorway, eyes bright with sleep he hadn't gotten. Do you need the codes changed? Do we move the ash sacks? Do we? You keep the old codes, Inigo said gentler than he felt. And don't test them or teach them tricks. If anyone in a robe comes asking questions, you play dumb so well they offer you a job. Rico almost smiled. I can do dumb. Good. Inigo clapped his shoulder once. And you, to Maddie, make tea. Not for me. For the room. It'll make the air remember what normal smells like. They scattered into their competence. Maddie rattled the grate, coaxed a small blue flame to life under the kettle. Rico did the fast, nervous tidy that doesn't move anything useful but convinces the hands they've helped. Inigo, because he needed a job with steps, opened his shop pane and slid well away from weapons. The categories felt different here. The words kitchen and care read more honest than artillery. Freedom shop. Home and comfort. Cot canvas sturdy folding. 300 tokens by. Privacy curtain on ceiling track. 450 tokens by. Portable air circulator quiet. 280 tokens by. Water filter pitcher. 90 tokens by. Ice packs reusable set of 6. 120 tokens by. Soft LED lanterns 2. 110 tokens by. The items thunked into the corner of the room with the same reliable physics as everything deadlier. He popped the curtain track up so the bed had a corner to itself. Lyra hated being watched when she was hurt. He set the circulator low so it wouldn't nag her head and let it move the room's air in a quiet, useful way. He swapped the ice pack at her shoulder for a fresh cold, checked the pulse number on the monitor, and put a lantern by the table set to a dim that meant sleep is allowed here. Tea, Maddie said, appearing with 3 chipped mugs and a small dish of honey. She put one by the bed, one by Inigo's elbow, one in her own hand like a ward. You can go, Inigo told them. Get some hours while the city's pretending. I'll shout if I need more hands. Rico nodded too quickly. Maddie hesitated, then leaned in and touched Lyra's hair like it might startle and bite. You come back mean, she told the sleeping Archer. Not gentle. We need your kind of mean. They left. The door clicked like a decision made. The apartment shrank back to its proper size. Inigo sat on the floor by the bed because chairs are lies when you plan to stay. He set the tea near his ankle, pulled the trauma pack closer, and checked dressings again with a deliberate slowness that made his hands feel less like fists. The butterfly strips held. The wrap was clean. The sling hadn't slipped. He traced the line of the splint with 2 fingers and followed its curve like you do when you find a trail at dusk and want to convince yourself you're still on it. Lyra's eyelids fluttered. He leaned forward, ready. She opened them to a slit, iris finding him like an arrow finds a seam. House, she breathed, voice ragged. Yeah, he said. House. She tried a smile but the muscles around it argued. Good. Beds don't smell like boiled rag. Only like pepper and oil and a certain Archer's boots, he said, letting his mouth soften on the last word. She swallowed, grimaced. Hammer. Gone, he said. We negotiated a rain check. He left compliments. I ignored half. Her eyes focused a degree more. You hurt. Only in places I like, he said. You. She tilted her gaze toward the sling and made a face that meant yes but not fatal. Tea's on, he offered. Later, she murmured. Head floats. That's the collar and the world agreeing to disagree, he said. He brushed a knuckle against her forehead, not quite a touch, just a promise. Sleep. I'll wake you to tell me your own name like a rude man at a border. She blinked slow. Lyra, she said anyway, stubborn in every syllable. Good start. He winked. Last name later. We'll build up to insults. She drifted. The monitor ticked on with patient curiosity. Inigo sat and let his back find the wall. The room made small sounds. The circulator whispering, the kettle settling, the city beyond starting its reluctant day. He didn't sleep. He practiced stillness like it was a craft. He woke her an hour later and again after that. Name. Where? How many fingers? Describe the urinal at the Golden Fry that always squeals like a bat. She cursed him on the 3rd round in a way that made him forgive everything. He gave her 2 sips of water, no more. Between checks he did the quiet work that makes a home hold. Cleaned the M4's carbon from its throat until it gleamed, set it muzzle down in the corner within reach. He laid Lyra's twisted bow on the table and didn't touch it. Some repairs are vows, not tasks. He swept the floor because grit underfoot makes tempers meaner. He counted the radiance in the coin jar and found they hadn't gotten any richer while he'd been getting poorer in other ways. He cooked because cooking is the kind of spell he believes in. Onions because they're honest. Garlic because it apologizes for everything. A chicken he'd salted 3 days ago as if he'd known they'd need this exact comfort. He browned bones in the small oven, then drowned them in water, brought it all to a simmer that sounded like a friend clearing their throat before saying something kind. He skimmed. He tasted. He added 3 peppercorns and then 5 because 3 seemed lonely. The broth made the apartment smell like not a battlefield. Neighbors would smell it on the stairs and remember they weren't alone. He tore stale bread into a bowl, poured oil and salt and made ugly croutons the way Lyra liked them, burned a touch so they admitted who they were. He ladled a cup and sat on the floor again. The steam fogged the edge of the vitals screen. The number there ticked steady, steady, steady. Lyra stirred, eyes slitting open. Smells like you're coping, she rasped. I'm faking competence for the audience, he said, dipping a crust and blowing on it. He held it near her mouth. Small bite. She took it, chewed like the action had to be negotiated. Swallowed. Salt, she decreed. Doctor's orders. He pinched a bit between fingers, touched it to the next piece. She ate again, and the line between her brows softened a fraction. You yell at Thorn? She asked, voice getting its edge back. I auditioned for town crier, he said. Didn't get the job. Good, she murmured, then drowsed for a long inhale. He did not return on a black ring like a proclamation. He folded into the seam he had kept for himself under the valley and let the earth close over him the way a book shuts to keep its place. The descent was quiet, good stone, old heat, the slow breath of tunnels that had never needed names. His hall greeted him with the small truths he liked. A basalt table polished by gauntlet and time, sconces that were not fire but remembered being fire, the dull, patient hum of runes that meant pressure, vent, focus. He sat carefully. That was new. Pain announced itself like a ledger read aloud. Hip, pitted by small storms and their stubborn cadence. Visor, starred with one impolite tunnel drilled where honest iron had insisted. Left ribs, opened by guided fury, closed by will and heat, now annoyed. Palm runes, one finger guttered, stable again because anger had bullied it. Cloak skin, sloughed twice, regrown in a hurry, sulking. He liked it. Pain spoke plainly. He had missed plain speech. Unbound soul, he said into the basalt, trying the human's title again as if it were a tool in a hand. The stone did not echo. Perfect. He replayed the fight with a craftsman's pettiness. Smoke thrown past him, not at him, to backlight and make the world tell thermal truth. Claymores set at shin height in a pair because one teaches and two insist. A hose of tiny bullets stitched so tight it looked like thread. Old Soviet steel that refused to lie. A Carl Gustav jet kissing a wound another tool had opened. The rude cannon, Black Dragon. First a blunt sermon, then a fracture that chose malice over elegance and became 6 arguments at once. And the archer. He did not soften. He gave her what mattered. Attention. A leaf that stings, yes, but one that listens. She hunted seams, not spectacle. She let the cook storms make openings and then spent her hurt wisely. She kept the angle of her shot while falling. The arrow that pinned his gauntlet for a heartbeat had disobeyed gravity with admirable manners. When he clipped her, helm and shoulder together, a cruel bell, he had aimed for removal, not kill. He had expected the man to fold with her. The man did not fold. The man got honest. The word felt like shape more than sound, a void that delivered teeth when asked with numbers. He could not see the gears, only the outcomes. Artillery groaning into being, missiles that curved like hawks with good teachers, a truck that rode a sky of smoke and then learned to group its notes. Infinite retaliation, the human had said with a mouth that half believed. Not infinite. Enough. Enough to make guessing expensive. Enough to make the day fun. Fun. He made the small ugly sound that lives between snort and laugh. He had not meant to think it. He allowed it. He stood and walked the length of the hall, testing gait and pride. The limp was surface, not core. He tapped a wall. A slab slid. The slate behind it drank his heat and brightened to map. He drew arteries under Elandra with a finger. The vaulted aquifer kings had forgotten. The crypt lattice that had been a prison when the world still sang in vowels. The old ward anchors that had stirred when he walked nearby, not awake, restless. He marked a spiral in the poorer quarter where brick wanted to be stone. He circled the river gate. He drew a thin line through the guild stables. Horses panicking at the right minute could do more work than 10 clever men. He pressed a small point where the market smelled of oil and onions and pepper. He did not write their names. He remembered hands and aim without poetry. He turned from the map and faced arithmetic. He could have died. Not drama. Accounting. If the dragon had carried a second fracture before he learned to curve the wall. If the archer's shaft had stuck at his elbow instead of snapping. If one heavy burst had stolen his balance a breath earlier. He might have become instruction rather than instructor. He was not afraid of death. He was afraid of boredom. Today had not been boring. He owed thanks to a cook with a temper and a leaf with good taste in seams. Thank you, he said, quiet enough to keep the compliment useful. Now, counter-grammar. Pressure walls, neat and proud, those cracked under fracture darts. Present curves, not planes. Teach force to slide. Cloak skin, too honest. Seed failure lines so fragments lodge and die. The visor, its star told a truth. Add inner baffles to catch what future honesty shoves through. Palm runes, Too legible. Bury the lines under plate. Let the gesture live in the shoulder so men watch the wrong hand. The shop he could not stop purchase perhaps nudge when. Teach battlefield air to file deliveries slightly wrong. 2 paces left, 1 heartbeat late. Not theft. Grit in a gear. Kinetic darts. Answer with song through stone. Harmonic cancels tuned to the dragon's barrel so force trips over its own echo. He would need to stand nearer ground. Good. He liked ground. Old guns that traverse by hand, tip the world under them, a patient undulation that steals center. He had done it at a pass once and watched a column miss everything by a handspan while insisting they were accurate. Missiles, respect first, move, then grids of false heat at improper depths. Pride makes guidance crash. Fog that eats jacket energy, hungry air cone where microguns hose loudest. Mortars and grenades and the 7 petty violences that turn alleys into teeth. Walk. Accept stings. Save answers for questions worth the price. He dismissed plate a finger's width from skin and let seam light dim. He examined the visor hole from the inside, ran 2 fingers along its burnt lip, spoke patience into it so it would mend without smoothing. Scars do more work than polish. He bled heat into the wall and pulled it back so stone would remember his appetite and offer itself tomorrow. He visited a corridor whose walls kept trivia, gouges from bad teaching days, a child's careful straight line, a footprint of someone he had loved badly. He did not put his foot in it. He never did. At the open roof room the sky looked down through a fault. He lay on his back and let heat rise like admission. He counted breaths until control returned with its usual arrogance. Plans arranged themselves without haste. Not Alandra, not yet. He was not a wall knocker. He was a pressure artist. A city with a cook like that deserved a week to sharpen or snap. If he struck at dawn he would earn spectacle and then waste. If he waited he might get a chorus. 5 small towns west believed they were too small to matter. He would teach one of them modesty and let the others decide. He would undulate roads, not break them, so wagons learned dances and time went missing. He would sing to ward anchors until they moved a finger. He would open a seam in a guild cellar and leave it there, not to enter, to remove sleep. He would not touch the stall of pepper and oil. He would ask the river to remember an old name and walk sideways for an hour, then pretend it hadn't. Confusion saves more lives than courage spends. Work then rest. He returned to the basalt, took out tools small enough to insult his scale and engraved. He wrote the new curve grammar along the palm and buried it under plate. He tuned the helm so the star became a funnel for future insults. He set 3 little catch pockets inside his chest for shrapnel's pride. He tightened the guttered finger rune and left it a little ugly so he would not forget to respect it. When he flexed, the changes complained the way good fits do before they concede. He allowed himself the indulgence of a breath that bordered on satisfaction. He went to the water room with no water, only steam that had changed its mind. He breathed until his bones stopped narrating. He said the archer's name once to file it correctly. He did not say the cook's. Names should not be spent where they do no useful harm. He returned to the map and drew a road east. Midway he wrote a small circle that meant lesson. He tasted Alandra through stone, towers trembling, not from fear but from indecision, bells learning a single note and holding it like stubborn farmers. He granted neither bravery nor cleverness. He granted hunger. Keep your iron singing, he said, and surprised himself by not knowing whether it was a threat or a wish. Before he left, he opened a chest and lifted a ring of glass caught from a lightning strike he had persuaded the sky to make in a particular sand. He remembered a different world. It asked if this one still had rain. He told it yes. It glowed with a promise older than any of his runes and went to sleep again. He smiled, a hairline crack in composure, and put it away. He stepped to the seam and smoothed the air where it would open when asked. Not yet. Let the field he wanted taste its quiet and learn the edges of its shadow. He allowed one indulgence. He admitted the sentence that had tried to form all day. He had been bested, forced to adjust first. He would repay that with interest and care. He thought of the human's casual talk. Gather your 7. Let them. 7 knives could make a better shape to push against. He would bring answers and questions and leave room for surprise. Surprise had fed him more honestly today than ruin had. He palmed the seam open. He paused, facing west, through stone, through memory, toward a small room that smelled of onion broth and leather and a woman's boots. where a man practiced stillness with a rifle cleaned past reason. "Stay loud," he murmured and stepped through. The seam closed with the busy indifference of a wound choosing to scar.